I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Francis, it's so good to talk to you again. I remember we chatted a few months ago, and I love what InsightCyber is doing because it's all about the cybersecurity of physical things, if I'm
Hmm.
remembering right, right? It was
Oh yeah.
not the normal computer software security, but places like a factory, maybe a nuclear power plant, things that, places
Mhm.
that have actual physical things that need to be secured. So tell me, am I summarizing it right? How would you summarize exactly what you do?
We call that the cyber physical world. I mean, everybody knows about computers and computers are wonderful, but it's been true for a good long time now that the machines, right? You mentioned power plants, manufacturing, pipeline facilities, all that stuff, healthcare equipment, all the stuff that runs the real world, not the computer world, but the real world, is sitting on the same computer networks that the computers are on for a lot of really good reasons. There's a lot of business benefit to that, but that produces a very different set of cybersecurity challenges.
So what was your background? Are you a physical real world guy? Are you a factory person? Are you an IT person? What was your background that you said, I'm going to start this company that does this particular thing?
Sure. Well, I've got a long experience in cybersecurity for industrial networks, and I've also had some background in industrial control systems engineering. Way back there, I was doing industrial control systems for manufacturing and pharma and oil and gas and things like that. At the same time, before I was just thinking about it, before the web browser was invented. So that tells you how old I am. But what we did is, and I've got a bunch of really great friends who have a similar background, and we just got really frustrated a handful of years ago at the state of cybersecurity. All right. So and this is not just in the cyber physical world, but also in the IT world, regular computers. All the tools and techniques that people use are really expensive, really hard to manage, and the bad guys are getting it anyway. So we asked, is there a better way? I mean, are we even asking the right questions? All right. So we thought about it long and hard, and we realized we could do better with an approach based on behavioral analysis augmented by artificial intelligence. And that's working out really well.
So how do you do your sales pitch? Who are you going to? What companies? How do you target? Because this is such a big
Yeah.
world you can go after. So where do you even begin?
That's a great question. I mean, we are working for a broad range of companies, from large manufacturers down to mid-sized companies that are moving all their applications to the cloud, all the way down to smaller companies that need a more cost-effective managed solution. And we're also getting a lot of interest from companies that have complex supply chains. So you think about that, and that's mostly medium and larger companies. You're doing business with a lot of partners. You're doing business with a lot of customers. They're in different parts of the world, and you're sharing information with them, and you're giving them a certain level of access to your own computer systems, right? And to your cloud-based systems. And that's a big problem because, you don't control their security, right? So you really can't say anything with a lot of confidence about what's getting in or not. And we're getting a lot of interest from people in that situation. And then, of course, everybody who runs from manufacturers, power generation companies, oil and gas companies, pipeline, which is oil and gas midstream and downstream. All of those companies are interested in what we do because for a couple of core reasons. One of them is asset inventory, just knowing what you have, especially industrial equipment. That turns out still to be, it sounds perhaps superficial, turns out to be a very difficult problem. And people need a good solution to that. And also just the basic problem of knowing when you're being attacked. All right. That's a change in the way people do cybersecurity. And so, a lot of companies are paying attention to what we're doing.
What's the price point here? How much are you charging, and how much of this is a price comparison shopping game between you and your competitors?
We're we're not cheap. Okay, when we've done bake-offs, competitive situations with other vendors, we end up near the top of the scale, but not at the top of the scale. But we tend to price it in a way that helps people realize that they're displacing the cost of security practitioners that they don't have to hire. Okay, one of the things that makes our approach much different from others is we use artificial intelligence, so we produce a lot more. We reduce false positives, radically reduce false negatives, and just make it so that you don't have to hire as many people. So that's where the our cost, our pricing, it reflects that. And I don't want to go down to, I can get into
a scale, 6
but,
digits, 7 digits, 8 digits. Like, what's a typical thing?
5 to 6 digits, high 5, low 6 gets you started with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it based on like what is it? What is like the metric that it's based on, right? Because it's not based on man hours. Like, what are you basing it on?
Great question. We basically base it on the facilities in use. Okay. Like if you are a company that wants to use us to protect industrial infrastructure or manufacturing, then the basic unit is a 4 walls manufacturing facility. It gets a little more complicated with electric power distribution because that's geographically distributed, but still there are natural scaling points that are related to the asset base of the company. That may sound a little trivial or old hat. It's not, because the way that other products, which are somewhat adjacent to us, the SIM products, for example, they tend to price based on the amount of information they store. Okay. And that gets ridiculously expensive. And it's just not a good match for how the people who run manufacturing and other kinds of infrastructure, it's not how they think. Their costs are driven by their profit centers, right? And their business units are structured that way. And that's how we built our pricing model. That's a pretty esoteric question, Eric.
I'm curious about these things. Ransomware, is that the top concern right now for your customers, or is there a bigger security concern beyond that?
I think that ransomware is absolutely the primary feature of the enhanced threat landscape that we all face as security practitioners and as businesses and as organizations. And it's because the skills needed to mount a ransomware attack are starting to filter down from the original, the nation state actors down to, your basic criminal organizations. The bad guys are upping their game.
So we're democratizing ransomware. Everyone can do ransomware now.
Not everybody, and I'll tell you why. I'm not disagreeing with you. You are right. That's what I'm saying. Ransomware is becoming more and more of a threat, and it's particularly critical for companies that have industrial assets. Okay, because those are connected to their IT assets, and there's this converged space between the industrial stuff and your regular computers, and that's the path in. Right. So whereas you might think, it's a standard, fairly well-known set of attack vectors, all right, to get into a company's IT. But then when it jumps over, it finds a way to jump over onto the industrial side, then the potential impacts just are off the chart. All right. And that accounts for that's why it's the biggest problem.
So what do you have to do differently for this operational technology, this cyber physical security? So what is involved more, and also, does a customer now need to buy 2 solutions? They need to buy their normal software cybersecurity solution. Oh, and now we got to go to InsightCyber. We got to get some extra stuff. It's going to cost us double.
It's if you every penny that you spend with InsightCyber is well spent. So I would say that that's all to the good. But what makes OT cyber physical different from IT in terms of cybersecurity techniques and practice and technology and tools, it's because you attack machines in a totally different way. All right. If you think about that, you generally can't install malware directly onto a robot or a PLC, which is, that's how you attack computers. Yeah, you go through phishing emails, right? And then you install malware on a vulnerable computer, and then you jump from there. Well, okay, so that's the way you attack an IT asset. As I said, you can't do that with a robot or a PLC. They're pretty well protected from that perspective, if only because they're usually, they're running firmware. They're not running software. All right. However, what you do is, if you're a bad guy, right? What you do is you get into the IT side through the normal ways, right? And then you jump over into OT, and then you find a way to infiltrate an engineering workstation or a jump box, and then you attack the machines by commanding them to do things they're not supposed to do. Okay, and that's the attack vector. Now, that's what makes them different. So you need totally different techniques. All right, where a lot of security products are focused on preventing infiltrations of malware on Windows computers. Doesn't help you one little bit. All right. So with a more advanced approach, it's based on behavior analysis, seeks to detect when malware is already in there, okay, and it's doing its thing. What it does is it slowly does recon, figures out where the machines are, what kind of machines are, and that takes quite a bit of time. All right, and you need to, if you're the bad guy, you need to stay stealthy during that time. You can't do anything that's going to tip off the defenders, okay? But that recon phase is a huge part of the attack cycle, much more than is the case for IT, and that gives us a leg up, okay? Because there's that lag time between the infiltration and the attack, right? We are able to look at behavior and spot the signs that something is going on, and that gives our customers an ability to clean them out and address the problems, remediate the issues before they turn into impacts. See?
Any stories that you can share? Maybe they are customers that said, okay, we need to sign up with you because something went wrong, or things that you've helped avoid. Like any fun stories to share while we're having this conversation, crazy things that have happened, like robots going wild, cars that are starting to drive themselves because they've been hacked at the factory.
Or crashed themselves.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a minute. I got to change my lights. I got to change the lights in here, make it dark. Okay, get some directed light in here because we're talking about Tales from the Crypt now. Literally everywhere that we install our technology, we find problems. We find unexpected things, from rogue devices, things that aren't supposed to be there, all the way to undetected malware. Like, there's no exceptions. There's,
like every single company that has signed up, you install your program and it's like, boom, here's a bunch of problems every time.
Within 24 hours, not just every single company, every single network.
Every single network right away.
Literally. So let me tell you some stories. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a smallish manufacturing, company. They, we spotted a security camera in there, and that's not there's nothing abnormal about that. Okay. But we saw it doing stuff that it shouldn't be doing. And we called them up, right? And we said, hey, look, there's a security camera, right? You know about this, right? Oh yeah, we put that in a few years ago. It's on the internet, don't you? No, it's not on the internet. Check your firewall configuration. Okay, a minute goes by. Another minute goes by. We're hanging on the phone. Oh, snap. It's on the internet. Okay, now they would never have found it. This was an error in security configuration. When they installed it, all right, they opened up an ability for someone to remotely manage and configure it, and then they forgot to shut it down again. That happens every day. Okay, if you got 1 million devices in a large organization, you're going to have some number of things like that. And what we found it because this camera was being accessed on a daily basis by a number of different spots in the internet. Some of them in all the garden spots, if you know what I'm saying, the sensitive countries.
Yep.
And they were just soaking telemetry out of it. Okay, so that's
looking like somebody was literally just watching what was happening in there.
Yes. And as soon as we pointed that out to them, they closed it off, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you guys just earned your money." That's one story. I got plenty more. I
got time. I'll mute myself. Go ahead.
All right. So here's a really crazy story. I talk about asset inventory, right? The whole idea that if you don't know what you have, all right, you can't secure it. And that's a hard problem, harder than it sounds like it should be. All right. Because anybody who runs, an industrial facility of any kind, or a service facility, medical facility, they'll give you, hey, you ask them, what do you got? What's in here? What's connected onto your networks? They'll give you a spreadsheet. Okay. Maybe wasn't updated for the last 2 years. Okay. So what we are able to do is we are able to tell them in deep detail exactly what they have right up to the minute and what it's doing. And we had a ransomware attack in one customer, and well, they weren't a customer yet. They came back to us after the ransomware attack. And this is a company that makes industrial control systems for the power generation industry, okay, over in Europe. And they said, we had a ransomware attack. Tell us how that got in. Okay. So within 5 minutes, we told them, okay, so this is what your network looks like. And they almost had a heart attack because they saw our list and they saw stuff on there that they didn't know was even there. One of them was an electric car charger that was sitting in front of their building. Okay. That was right there on their network. Okay. If you don't know it's there, you don't know what to look for problems. Okay. All right. More tales, right? Building management, commercial real estate management is something that is just an enormous set of problems for cybersecurity. We analyzed a building in a very large major city, which I will not name, in the United States. And we realized that like a lot of buildings, you walk in, you want to be good to your tenants, and you want your tenants to be able to serve their customers. So they have open guest Wi-Fi. Okay.
That's always a problem. The open guest Wi-Fi is always bad.
Well, but you got to have it, because otherwise, it's an essential part of customer service. And you could argue that from a security perspective, but that never wins the day, right? Customer service matters more than cybersecurity. You balance them. Okay. It's a business concern. So here's what happened. We found that all these iPhones and iPads were on the same network as the HVAC controls for this large commercial building. All right. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to walk into that building. I mean, the risk is just so high. And this is why that matters, because if you think about, all of our listeners, your listeners who are, conversant or in the business of commercial real estate management, the economics of that business are exceedingly critical and marginal. And if for them to spend a few $100s a month per building on cybersecurity is a lot. Okay. So they just don't have the resources to put in the kind of extensive security controls and personnel that are standard for IT in large companies. And that's where we come in, because our stuff, our product, our platform is very, very cost effective, essentially requires zero management and very easy to put in. So we bend the economics. All right. So in an environment like that, we can make it economically feasible to get much better security. I got more stories.
Tell me one more. Tell me the best one you have in the can.
All right. How about this? How about a home lighting switch?
You go to smart home, the smart switches.
Yeah, smart lighting, smart. You go to Home Depot, or you buy them on Amazon. You put them in your house.
Yeah.
Okay. And it, you can turn on your lights from your smartphone and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people think that that's cool, right? We had one from a very major company that I'm not going to name, but it was made in China. And it's doing its thing, right? It's hiding its traffic behind VLAN tags. It wraps its network packets that it sends out to the internet in VLAN traffic. So most, you're going to miss most of it. All right. But here's what we found out. It was trolling around the network it was in, looking for Windows file servers. You don't expect a light switch to be looking for data in your network. And then at the same time, it's sending these big packets of data out, it's phoning home to its maker, right? And sending these big piles of encrypted data with who knows what in them.
So how does this work? So let's say I buy the light switch from Home Depot or whatever, just like a basic thing. It costs me $20.
Not to dump on Home Depot.
But like at any retailer, like I buy one of these big brand smart lights from a big brand retailer. Let's say it cost me $20, $50, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, sure.
I stick it in. Let's say it's here, like it's behind me right here. I plugged it in, and now it's looking on my network for this computer's Windows. But is that a person who's doing that, or is that just its system is doing that?
We believe, based on that analysis, and we've seen it. We actually went and bought a couple more just like it, and we found that they were all doing it. So we think it's baked into the firmware. Now, think about what that really is, a category of, it's not malware, it's over functionality that's built into the device.
How did that even get sold? Why is that even happening? It should never be doing that. And why is it being sent back to
Thank you.
China?
That's
or
my
wherever?
question. That's
Yeah.
I can give you some reasons for it. I mean, you've heard the old saw that, if you're getting services for free, like from, social media companies or free email providers, you're the product. Okay.
Right. We've heard
You've
that.
heard that
Yeah.
old saw. Well, in
Yeah.
that case, somebody who is installing an IoT, that's an IoT device, in your home network or in a company network, okay, they're looking to profile your behavior, because that information is highly valuable commercially. And I think that a lot of people, once you point that out to them, they say two things. First of all, you're stealing information that I own. You're potentially compromising my operations by leaking information. All right. And third, it's not yours. All right. I'll be damned if I'll let you monetize my behavior. Okay. So, but again, you see the problem there. And this stuff looks like normal network traffic, so that your standard cybersecurity tools won't spot it, because it doesn't look like malware at all. And if you're using a SIM product, which many, many large companies do, that is a standard mechanism, you're not going to spot that unless you know what you're looking for. And that's why, in our case, what we use is behavioral analytics that's driven by artificial intelligence. So we spot anything that has a funny smell to it, like that. Okay. And that is really what gives you an advantage.
You mentioned AI. So what are you doing? How are you using AI? Because I feel like AI, when I studied it 20 years ago at MIT, it had a different meaning, I feel like, than it does now. Everyone has AI, right? Everyone's using AI. So how are you specifically using AI? What do you mean by it? And what does that mean relative to, okay, if you just had an army of people trying to figure this out?
AI is absolutely critical. All right, but it's very far from easy to get it right. And we've been working at it for years now. And I know what you're thinking about with the AI as an adjunct. 20 years ago, when you were at MIT, people were talking about expert systems a lot in those days. And a lot of the techniques that we now think of as standard AI, like deep learning or machine learning, were very much in their infancy. And there have been great strides in using AI for things like image detection. For cybersecurity, it's lagged behind greatly. Okay. And what we see, the things that AI does for you, it has two key benefits for cyber. Scale, of course, is one of them. All right. And AI is like, if your brain was 10,000 times bigger than it is, and you had 10,000 eyes, right, then you could see what AI can see, all right, automatically. But the other really important benefit of AI is what I call surprise. Okay. AI spots things that a human wouldn't necessarily think to look for, especially not a cyber expert. Okay. We think of AIs as guys. They're people. Okay. It's an intelligence. It's artificial, but it's an intelligence. And what that means is that you give it a set of algorithms and a way of looking at the world, and then you give it a world to look at. Okay. And just as you take a young person, a young engineer, or a young MIT graduate, right? And the experiences that he or she has when they first go out to work, that determines what you're able to think about, what you're able to look for. What we have found, and this is almost magic, all right, is you put an AI to work looking at all the information that comes off of a computer network, be it IT or OT or cloud-based or whatever it is, and it'll put things together. It'll make connections, and it'll spot anomalies, and it'll spot them over time, and it'll point out, it'll kick things out and say, take a closer look at this. This doesn't look quite right. All right. And our approach, we call it next generation AI. Okay. Because rather than just using a machine learning or a single training set, all right, or at worse, what some companies do, they'll put in an AI and you have to spend 6 months, for it to fully learn your environment, which is completely useless. right? Big waste of time and money. All right. But a hybrid next generation approach uses, as I said, okay, AIs are people. They're guys. Okay. Every one of them has slightly different training. So they're looking at different things. All right. And we put a half a dozen, at least, different AIs to work together with humans who then look at what the AI kicks out and curate it and make a decision as to whether that's a real problem or not. And that's how we're able to eliminate, or largely eliminate, false positives, false negatives, and turn the humans that are employed by the customer from script monkeys into threat hunters. We're just giving a whole lot more information. And as I said, people who are listening to us, Eric, who are knowledgeable just as you are. I mean, I know what you're thinking. For that approach to work, it's heavily data driven. Yes, it is. And that's another problem that we had to solve. All right. You can't really make an approach like that work unless you're looking very deeply and very granularly at the information that comes out of a customer environment. And that is another problem that we've solved pretty well.
How many people do you have working now at your
we're still pretty small. We've got a couple dozen, but we are growing rapidly and hiring.
Do you need to keep hiring more people as you get more customers because you need more eyeballs watching every single account?
Yes, but fewer than you think, because the AI does so much of the work.
Yeah. So you need someone to oversee the AI, like to look at the red flags, dig in a little bit, investigate.
Early in the life cycle of each customer, we do that. And then as the AI gets better and better and smarter and gets to know that customer better, then it tails off.
Who are you competing against in terms of, if they don't go with you, is there another company that they typically go with, or is it just they don't sign up at all with anybody?
So there are a number of companies that are very well known, that have gotten a lot of investment, that focus on IoT security per se. And what they really are is they have sensors, network sensors, and they give you asset inventory, and they'll do vulnerability scans. And what makes us different from them, okay, is they don't tell you what to do when they find a problem. Okay, so having our approach be based on a novel kind of AI. And by the way, we work with those companies, right? I'm not going to, they're fairly well-known names among people who do OT cybersecurity, but they're out there, and there's a good half a dozen of them, or if not more. But we can ingest their data, all right? And we put, in addition to, we have our own sensors in case people don't have sensors. But if a customer of ours already has one of those other companies, we'll ingest their data and we'll process it using our AI, and we'll tell them, this is what we found. All right. And this is what you should do about it. Okay. And that's a big advantage. And another, for companies that are strongly IT centric or are interested in protecting cloud-based applications, those companies will use the SIM products. Okay. And we also work with them, although we can displace them. All right. Because we do a lot of the analysis that the SIM products do without having to store so much data. All right, so you save money on data movement costs and data storage costs, as well as just getting much better intelligence out of them. And again, I would say this whole, I'm just deeply in love with the way our technologists have constructed this way of finding stuff that a human wouldn't think to look for. Because as I said earlier, Eric, I mean, the bad guys are upping their game. They're really good at working around people.
Who are the bad guys? Are they government actors, state actors? Are they just independent gangsters on computers? They're like, who is the most commonplace, or let's say the most important bad guy that we have to think about? It's always that, Eastern European / Russian / Iranian / North Korean, Chinese, like those are the countries that I always hear of. And it's usually a state sponsored actor. Is that the reality of it, or is that just what's in the media?
That's a very, very important question. As you pose the question, the answer is yes, but that's not the whole story. Okay. Now, just to the point about the specific countries, well, yes, but they're not the only countries that have very extensive cyber capabilities. I would say of all the countries in the world with the best cyber, The one I would place at the top is the United States.
I was going to say, because we are also doing a lot of things to other countries.
Let's not put it quite that way.
We're using it as a military capability. Let's put it that way.
We have extensive capabilities, and that is the end of that part of this conversation.
Okay, let me change topics. Okay, you go. Go ahead.
I would like to answer your question, though. Okay, because the nation state actors are preparing for war, and they're doing recon, and they will not trigger attacks, generally speaking. That's why I said earlier, the threat profile, because that's what's relevant for our practitioners.
Right.
People who are on a day-to-day basis need to enhance their security or do a better job than they may be doing now. All right. They do need to be worried about the criminals. Okay. Now, it is true that in some locations, the criminal organizations are connected to state actors, but that's not most of it. Okay. We did see, when the Ukraine war started, I think a lot of people said this, I'm not betraying anything secret, but there was a pretty substantial change in the profile of cyber attacks that people saw coming from the Russians as they got diverted into their war effort, and from the Iranians, because, the financial sanctions, right? Because the sanctions against Russia went mostly through the financial system in Europe. All right. And so that changed the profile of the attacks. So you can see what's going on there. But in terms of proximate threats that will trigger immediate impacts that people have to worry about day to day, it's the ransomware, and ransomware is triggered by criminals, people who are trying to make money. I don't worry about the low grade, the third tier of attackers, which is the punks, right? The script kids. People are just trying to make trouble. All right. They're just not good enough. All right. And by and large, people's defenses now here in 2022, right, after years of working on cybersecurity, they've gotten good enough. The locks on your doors are good enough to keep those people out. Okay. But the criminals are acquiring some of the better techniques, particularly the recon techniques that impact the cyber physical, the industrial world. That's the big thing that is different this year. Sorry to interrupt you. You were going to make a point.
Good. No, it's scary. What's your advice for, let's say, a company that's starting their cybersecurity journey, or they're revamping it? Where do they begin? Other than saying, okay, call you and get set up, but like, where do they even begin? If you're focused on, hey, my company does X, I'm not an expert in cybersecurity, I don't even know where to begin. And there's thousands of firms, and it's overwhelming.
There are. The advice I would give is to recognize that the bad guys are already inside your environments, whether it's IT, OT, or cloud. They're already there. And start thinking that way. Okay. A lot of, and you're talking about people who are just starting their cyber journey, medium and large companies, because it's such an important guarantor of your ability to do business. They've been focused on and invested heavily in cybersecurity. But as I said, the standard practices and techniques aren't keeping the bad guys out. All right. So I would say, again, start thinking about it this way. The standard way of thinking about cybersecurity is to keep from getting infiltrated. Well, that's the same as putting stronger locks on your doors. All right. You got to do that. That's good to do. All right. But a certain amount of the malware is going to get in, even if you knock out 98% of it. Okay. 2% will get in, and it will be stealthy, and it's going to be on the inside of your networks, right? Doing things and reconning, mapping out what kind of machines you have, how you do your industrial processes, and figuring out ways to attack you. All right. And they are very, very well motivated. So they're going to do it, and they're very patient. You've heard many stories, somebody comes in months. They're there for a year, they're there for 18 months, right? Well, stop them while they're still doing the recon. And the way I like to think about it is, and I hate to, this is a challenging thing to say, because people will say, well, you're overplaying this, Francis. Come on. But think about this as cyber war. Okay. And in war, what you do, it's not enough to just protect your borders. You want to protect your territory as well. Okay. And that is the reason why we evolved this approach that's based on deep visibility into behavior that looks normal. Okay. But use AI to find things that are just slightly out of normal that are maliciously being hidden.
What's your view on ransomware? Should people pay it? Should companies pay it? Or should they try to not encourage people to keep doing it by not paying? But then they're the ones that get screwed.
I'm so sorry to say this. I can't there's no one size fits all answer to that. You know, that's what makes ransomware such a challenge, and why, you know, it's much better to keep from getting hit by it in the first place. There literally is no good answer to that, right? I mean, if you pay it, you know, there's been plenty of stories where people paid it and then they managed to get a government entity like law enforcement, federal law enforcement involved and reduce the payment. And that works, but that's hardly a strategy. And if you don't pay it, you're going to have massive impacts. And as a business leader, okay, it's one thing you can say, well, I don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, you can't do that if you're a publicly owned company and you have shareholders, and they're saying, no, you would not compromise safety of our people and the integrity of our markets and our ability to keep doing business. You can't do that. All right, it's just an evil conundrum, and there's no good answer. And frankly, I'm just left with the only advice I can give is to do everything you can to keep from getting smacked in the first place.
Okay. Okay. What about personally? So everyone listening, they may not own a company, but they're all people. You mentioned the smart life, for example, that gave me some red flags. What are you doing personally at home with your computer, your phone, your IoT devices at home for your family? And then what's your advice for just a normal consumer? What are the security settings to do or not do, or these cloud products to use or not use? Where does a normal person begin?
You know, it's a tough question. And what makes that an urgent question, Eric, and a really, really good question, is that it's not just people sitting at home with their networks and their smart IoT devices. They're working from home. Okay.
Right. Remote work right
is
now.
Remote working at home is a big thing. It's not just your assets and your family and your personal information. It's your companies as well.
Right.
Okay. So I think it's hard for ordinary people who are generally not security experts to get a grip on this. I mean, I could give advice like, you know, don't use IoT devices, right? Well, that's not going to fly. All right. But I do think that, you know, we make our technology available for ordinary people, you know, on a low cost or free basis, you know, just so that they can assess what they have. I mean, in my own house, all right, I have a few servers, and I found that one of them was running the Tor browser. Okay. It wasn't exfiltrating anything, but that wasn't there. I didn't install it.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not
Radar found it and said, get rid of that. And we got, you know, I got rid of it. And that's a good example. But you know, we can do that kind of stuff. But what's more important to that point, I just want to expand it a little bit to companies that have large remote workforces. In a lot of cases, Eric, they will say, you know what? We're moving all of our applications to the cloud. Now, it's different with if you're manufacturing, you've got machines. If you have got machines, you're not going to manage them from the cloud. Okay, that's a bridge too far. All right, to most people, that's just not secure enough. All right, but if you do a lot of your business, financial company, insurance company, a lot of service-based companies, they're moving all of their compute resources to the cloud, and their people are working from home. Great thing to do. It's a good thing. Okay. And even if you didn't think it was a good thing, you're not putting that genie back in the bottle because the economics are just too compelling. Right. But I've had people say, you know what? I literally had a guy at a very important company a couple of weeks ago tell me, we don't have email anymore. Okay. We do everything with Office 365. Okay. So that standard vector, right, which is through phishing emails, all right, for ransomware and malware, we don't have that anymore. So I'm not worried about malware and ransomware anymore. Okay.
He's smart. Look, he's outsmarted everybody.
He's outsmarted, and we're like, go with God. When you get spanked, come back to us in 6 months, and we'll raise our price on you. But you know, we'll help you then. But here's the interesting thing about that. Okay, and this is actually very, very important. all right, for security practitioners. The attack vector now is totally different. All right, if you're running a large IT shop with people who are, doing email on their office computer, well, yeah, phishing emails. That's the primary vector for attacks. If you're in the cloud where your resources are in Docker containers, right, that channel doesn't exist anymore. But you remember what I said, at the beginning, with machines, industrial machines, you can't put firmware, you can't put malware on them. Okay, you attack them by sending them commands to do dangerous or disallowed things. That's the exact same profile for attacking a cloud-based application. Okay, they are accessed through the web. They are accessed through encrypted, communications channels. They are accessed by people who are authorized to do so, and some of those accesses are malicious. And so, tracking vulnerabilities and risks and problems in cloud-based applications is very much the same technologically and methodologically for us as it is looking for it in industrial machines. So that opens up a whole new area, right? And for people who have a large at-home remote workforce, they need to be thinking about that very carefully.
So much to think about. So we'll end on this. Lastly, I know you are an opera singer, and we've interviewed some other cybersecurity people before with some musical talents, and this is sort of a theme, a trend. What's going on here? What tell me about the opera, and why does it seem like a lot of cybersecurity folks have this musical background?
So I went to music school. Okay, you went to MIT, which is just a wonderful school. Hats off. I admire that. I went to the Eastman School of Music. All right, which is, if you have any classical music geeks among your listeners, they'll know exactly what that is. And then I went to Michigan for graduate school, and my graduate studies were orchestral conducting.
I wanted to be a far trip to cybersecurity here.
Not really, because even then, when I was in school, I noticed that people who have a strong aptitude for music also are just naturals at math and the kind of symbolic thinking that they become great programmers, and they're naturals at it. I mean, I've seen, young people try to learn how to program, but people who have a music background just pick it up intuitively. And it's a funny thing. And I really have no explanation for this, Eric. I've noticed it many, many times. I've seen it myself, but I couldn't give you a reason why. I mean, I'll tell you one thing I know. When a lot of people like to listen to music. They have music going when they're working. I can't do that. All right. Because to me, music is a left brain activity. If there's music on, I listen to it.
Oh, right. It's serious to you. It's not background. It's for
no. It's people who love popular music and everything. They're serious about that too. It's not less serious. I'm just saying it's a different part of the brain.
Right.
All right. Perhaps more analytical. And maybe that's the answer to your question, right? People who have that, analytic connection to music also have it with mathematics, and maybe that's the linkage. But you're right. I've seen it a lot all my life. And as far as opera singing is concerned, I wanted to be an opera conductor, so I just studied voice. I'm not a great singer by no means, but I know enough technique, all right, to actually make a workable sound, and and so
you're probably better at singing than
when I can.
You're probably better at singing than me, and you're probably better at cybersecurity than me. So, Francis, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show. This has been super fascinating. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.